This is Lady Anne, owner of KPNL Radio and hostess of the Caravan Library of Lore, and I support Tessa. As an experiencer myself, I have filed my own reports with them, and the professionalism and heart they have shown my case goes above and beyond. If you have had an experience, I cannot recommend Tessa enough.
Hi, this is Ernie Hudson, Winston Zedmore from Ghostbusters. I want to let you know that Brian Stacy, he's created the Experiencer Support Association, TESA. You can check them out at www.tesacan.org. Now, they investigate paranormal, UFO, and provide support to experiencers. But you can check them out at, like I said, www.tesacan.org and see for yourself if they're really Ghostbusters. I can tell you this, they are a non-profit organization. Good luck, have fun, and keep it blessed.
Good evening. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencer Support Association. Tessa is a UFO, paranormal, and paracryptid investigation association. We investigate everything belonging to the global phenomenon linked to highly strange and unexplained experiences. We also connect experiencers with other experiencers, creating a safe, positive environment to engage and discuss this phenomenon without judgment, criticism, or retribution. From the land of the white rolling sands, from the southeasterly tip of Georgian Bay, to all of you listening around the world, as we simulcast live on KPNL Radio, we salute you. If you want to go back and listen to our previous episodes, go to youtube.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to be instantly notified when we are live, not only for these episodes, but every single element Tessa has to offer. On our website, tessacan.org, we have something for everyone. We have support for experiencers, data for independent researchers, and places to advertise for professional partners. This live portion of the show will run for about 45 minutes. We'll have a commercial break and then spend some time answering some of your questions in the comments. The show will continue immediately after on Patreon for our private members, so head over and become a member for the unclassified tier and receive additional content from this episode and so much more for only $7 a month. To all our Patreon members, you are awesome, and thank you for helping us heal the world. All proceeds go back into the mission and will continue to help us create educational content for you and your family. Become a member today by going to patreon.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Also, if you're joining us live on Facebook or Twitter, head over to our youtube.com/the Experiencer Support Association if you want comments read out in the chat. We're only answering questions on YouTube, so head on over, hit that subscribe button, and start chatting. If you can't stay for the entire show, don't worry. Every Monday, we will upload the audio file to our podcast network for you to take us on the go. Okay, you ready? Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Today is Thursday, April 22nd, and I, Ryan Stacy, am your host this evening. If you're watching this live on YouTube, remember to comment hashtag Tessa merch to be entered into this month's draw. Each episode you do this on gives you a chance to win this month's prize, which is actually, and I remembered it this time, one of these Tessa hats and an I Am Experiencer bumper sticker. All you have to do is hashtag Tessa merch in the comments on YouTube. And every week for the rest of April, to be entered into this draw. So our guest for season 3, episode 13 is Tommy Highway. Tommy Highway was born near Dayton, Ohio, which is home to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. The base is the rumored storage area of the Roswell crash and bodies, as well as the wreckage from other crash sites. Rumors were abound growing up in that area, and soon he was hooked on the subject. In the 1990s, Tommy had 2 experiences with exotic technology that, for him at least, answered the question of whether or not we are alone in the universe. Being a government employee meant having to keep his secret for years out of fear of ridicule or loss of career. After going into the private sector, he detailed his experiences in his book, Strange Tales from the Highway. Tommy Highway is currently the co-host for the UFO Man show. Tommy, put on your tinfoil hat. How are you doing this evening?
Fantastic, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Right on, right on. I hear what sounds like the Predator in the background. It's kind of weird. Do you hear that? Do you hear that?
No.
No? Strange. Okay. I don't know where that ticket's come from. But anyways, so let's get into it. I want you to tell me the most fascinating thing you learned living next to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Anything going on growing up there?
Yeah, growing up there was very interesting because the fact that the base, the Wright Patterson Air Force Base, was actually the rumored storage site for the actual Roswell crash, the bodies, and other crashes and things like that. It was a thing. It was like a big thing growing up. I had teachers when I was in grade school talk about it, things like that. So, I mean, everybody in that area would tell you that this is a known thing. It's interesting because growing up, you heard all kinds of interesting rumors. One of the things was that Wright Patterson Air Force Base is basically, there's a city underneath it. And I believe that. And anybody that has ever worked for Disney Orlando can tell you that there can be a city underneath the city. Okay, that we can do that. We have that technology. So it's rumored that that there actually a cryo system there to be able to store the bodies, things of that nature. So, you know, when growing up, I mean, everybody in that area would tell you the same thing.
Okay, so have you, as an investigator, ever looked into it? Have you ever gone there to try and find anything that would reference an entrance or anything? Because you're close to it. You're really close proximity.
Well, I mean, it is a military base, and I mean, they're pretty serious about their security and things of that nature. So it's really difficult to get on the base unless you work there, which a lot of folks do. They have a huge civilian workforce. In fact, it's one of the, I think, larger employers in the area. But yeah, I mean, as far as getting on base, I'd love to. Boy, I'd love to get underneath there, but I don't think it's going to happen.
No, for sure. I mean, as it should be, right? Like, because that exactly as you said too. So you got no friends on the inside, like living there at all. You weren't able. Because you said you were a government employee at one point. What was that? What were you doing for the government?
I'd actually rather not say.
Okay.
Other than say I was a government employee, but I do have something else interesting about the base. I remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I was a young kid, I could have been maybe 10, 12 years old, something like that. My uncles married a girl. They lived in Kentucky, and it turns out that her father is like a colonel at the base. In fact, he was such an important guy that they would actually fly him every week, fly him to the base from Kentucky. He would, stay there all week or whatever, and he would come home on the weekends. And real nice guy, just really took a shine to me as a kid for some reason, and I really liked him. And he and I were taking a trip to I think the supermarket or something like that at one point. And because we were there in Kentucky visiting, my father and I. And on the way back, I just mentioned, I was like, okay, because I'm a kid, there's no tact when you're a kid. There's no, you don't have that going on. So I just kind of blurted out, hey, listen, what's really going on there with the alien thing? Are there really aliens there? Something to that effect. And I got to tell you, this guy went from, he was ready to bounce me on his knee to completely cold to me. And I mean, he was cold to me for the rest of the trip. If I ever saw him again, it's like he would look right past me. I don't know if it offended him or what, but when I said that, our relationship changed.
That would make sense. Maybe he's conditioned to that, or he didn't want to have that stigma associated to him, and he was in a comfortable environment, and maybe just threw him off, or like maybe he knew, and he was just like, oh shit, this conversation's not going the way that I was hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's so. Have you talked to him since?
No. In fact, they divorced many years ago. This was again, I was very young, but
yeah, no worries.
Night and day relationship. I mean, the guy was my best friend, and then he wasn't.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, let's talk about something you probably have a lot more details about, and that's your experiences. You mentioned you had two. So what was the first one? What was that all about?
Well, the first one was actually in northern Iowa, and well, to be honest with you, it was the night that Mike Tyson was defeated by Buster Douglas for the first time. Okay. And I know that because that evening, my girlfriend and I were living together pretty much right out of high school, and we were going to have a big meal that night, party a little bit, and watch this fight. As it happens, she was a college student, and she worked at nights at a local Target store. This is a very small town we're talking about in northern Iowa, at least at the time. In fact, the Target store that she worked at, and this is back when Target stores were like itty bitty little things. They didn't sell food and groceries and all of that. It was just, your basic, like a Kmart or something. And it was right on the edge of town. And I mean, right past this Target store, there was nothing but cornfields and silos as far as the eye could see in every direction. So, as it happens, there's a road, like an old farming road, about a mile or so behind this Target store. And it's the kind of thing that there's no houses back there. There's no cops. Real good place to take your car and run it. If you want to rip your car around, nobody's around. And I did this often. And I would drop her off at work, and then she would work until usually till 10 o'clock when she'd get off. So about 9:30 or so, I would drive out there periodically and race my car, and everything was fine. So this day comes, and I'd spent the day going out and getting food and everything while she was at school. Then she went to work, took her to work. And that evening, sure enough, I got bored and decided to race my car. So I go out to this road, and I'm headed down the road for probably the third time, and the car starts to shake. And I thought, this is weird. I'm looking at my gauges, and everything looked okay. And then I even let off the accelerator, thinking, there's something wrong with my car, obviously. And it really started to shake at that point. And for whatever reason, I remember thinking to myself, earthquake. It's a friggin' earthquake. And I'd never been through an earthquake before, being a Midwesterner. So I immediately stopped the car, and I jumped out because I wanted to feel the earthquake on my feet. That's, for whatever reason, this was what I was thinking.
Logic. That's good. That's good.
And as soon as I got out of the car shut down. I mean, completely dead. I mean, the lights, everything. And I'm standing there looking at the car, and it's pitch dark. And this is like the wintertime. So there's like a frost on the ground, that sort of thing. And the car door is open. I'm standing there looking into it, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what do I do to this car? It's a brand new car. And I'm also thinking, what am I going to tell my dad, to be perfectly honest with you? And all of a sudden I look up, and something catches my eye. And I look to the north, and I would say probably maybe, and I'm a shooter, so I would say 500-600 yards away from me to the north is this huge ball of light, and it's a very dull red. I'd almost want to describe it as a maroon light, if that makes any sense at all.
Okay.
But it was out of place. It was huge. I mean, it was obviously something that it was not a balloon. It wasn't a blimp. I went through all of the logical things that it could be in my mind at the time, and nothing fit. So as I'm watching it, and it's moving, it's actually moving on a track from north to south or thereabout. And all of a sudden it got about, let's say, to my 2 o'clock position, and then it dropped straight down, and it lost about half its altitude. And then it just stopped dead in the air. It's crazy. And then it started emitting this molten material. I don't know, out of the bottom or the back or whatever, wherever. But this stuff was so bright that it lit the night sky up like it was daytime. I mean, you couldn't look at it. In fact, I'm having to shield my eyes, and the only way that I can see this stuff is I see the reflection off of my car. Look at it that way. And it dumped this stuff, must have been 3 or 4 times, and then it stopped doing that, and then it started gaining altitude again, and it basically crossed my path at this point. And again, we're talking probably 500 yards ahead of me. And it just as it gets to my, say, 11 o'clock position, it dropped again. And this time, I thought it was going to hit the ground because it really went down. And then it stopped again, and it emitted some more of that material. And it did this another 3 or 4 times or so. So then it began to get more altitude and began to travel like in a 45-degree angle to the south. Well, as I'm watching this, something catches my eye to the north, and I look over, and here comes a really small, bright light, I would say about the color of the sun, let's say, kind of an orange, yellowish kind of color. And it came streaking in, really moving really fast from the north. And it's making a beeline. It's obviously headed right for this thing. Mm-hmm. So as I'm watching this one come in, another one comes from right behind me. And it's headed right to this thing too. So it just scared the crap out of me. Not that I already wasn't freaked out. I promise I was.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so basically what happened was the one from the north disappeared behind the main object, and the one that came from behind me stopped right in the center of it. So imagine, to give you some perspective, let's say a basketball straddled by 2 tennis balls, maybe ping pong balls. Okay. Something like that. Yeah. And they all just stopped, and they just sat there. And I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere to go. This is before cell phones and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm here for the show. There's literally nowhere I can go. So I watched for to me it seemed like it was about 20 minutes or so. But
okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Well, I was just going to think, was there any sense that they, like, you obviously knew it was there, but did they know you were there? Was there any? You were just not even part of that. You were just there.
I just think I happened to be there. I'm not sure that they were aware or concerned about my presence at all. They didn't react to me or anything.
Well, I know, but just with it dropping off some hazardous material that you don't know what could be, it could be like, you could have got hurt, infected with something. Who knows, right?
Sure, radioactivity, things like that. And I was thinking that too. I was thinking, oh my God, what is that crap? Am I in danger? It did cross my mind.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway,
keep going.
So they sat there and they didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden, after a while, the big one, and I describe it in my book as it starts swirling with light, but that's really not accurate. There's just really no great way to describe what this thing was doing. But imagine millions of little points of light all of a sudden would appear inside of it and then disappear. And this happened 3 or 4 times until all of a sudden, like the 4th time, whoop, this thing brightens up and becomes exactly the same color as the other 2. Okay. Now, as soon as this happens, they shoot straight up in the air. They shoot tens of thousands of feet up into the air, just like that. And I can still see them up there, but now they're so high up, they look like one object. And then all of a sudden, boom, they just shot to the south and they were gone. Now, the interesting thing about this is, as soon as they left the area, and I mean the second they left the area, my car came back on. Now, I don't mean that the engine turned over, but I mean things like the lights were on, the stereo was on, it's blazing static because I was jamming when this happened, right? Mm-hmm. And so I get in the car, and the car has kind of stereo. It's got those rocker buttons where you push one side, the volume goes up, the other side, the volume goes down, like that. Mm-hmm. So it took a while for volume to go down. So I just went ahead and hit the power button. When I did that, there's a clock right next to the power button. The clock is flashing 12:01. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but you have to take into account that I drove this car 12 years and 354,000 miles. I had the battery out of this car half a dozen times anyway over the years, and it never reset anything. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that at the time because the car was new, but anyway, so that was interesting. So I remember thinking to myself, okay, should I try to drive back into that pasture, into that cornfield, and see if I can find these burn marks or whatever? And then I thought, well, what if I get stuck? Besides, I'm late to pick up my girlfriend anyway, so I better get out of here. So I get back in the car. I remember grabbing the keys and turning it on, thinking, is it going to start? And yeah, it fired right up, no problem. I took off and I spun around and I took back off to where, or headed back to where she worked. So I turned the radio on to see if I could get some news or something, see if somebody else is seeing this, because someone else had to. And I noticed that all 5 of the electronic presets on the stereo were also reset to factory. So it reset this car, and it's the only thing that ever did that. This car was even hit by lightning once and didn't reset it. Yeah. So anyway, I get to the Target store. It's closed hard. I mean, every light that they turn off at night is off. There's no cars in the parking lot. My girlfriend's not there. Again, this is before cell phones. So we only lived like 2 miles away. So I hurried home and I pulled up and I knew she was there because every light in the house was on. I walk in. She's reading me the riot act, ripping me a new one about being responsible. And the whole time I'm going, but listen, but I'm trying to convey this story. This just happened to me, a woman here. Okay. And she's not having it. So finally, I'm like, listen, I can't be that late anyway, because I'm thinking took like 30 minutes or so. And she grabs me by the wrist and leads me into the kitchen. And we had one of the quintessential battery-operated round clocks up on the wall.
How much time was missing, man? How much?
An hour and a half.
Huh.
An hour and a half. And this is the drive time on this is maybe 10 minutes. So that's not a significant amount of time. I don't think I was abducted or anything like that. I think that I was just witnessing something that was so awesome that it just messed with my perception of time personally. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's definitely possible. There's so many variables there too. So what do you think the explanation is? I know you're sensing by the way you're telling the story, you're very analytical and you're very careful not to project anything without facts, and it's very good. But what do you believe it to be? What does your gut tell you happened? And what's the explanation for the car shutting off?
I believe that I was looking at alien technology, and that large object was clearly in trouble. I mean, if I would have seen an aircraft doing something like it was doing, I would say it's in trouble. If I were to see a bird flying in the air the way this thing was behaving, I would say it's in trouble. And I think that's what it was. And I believe that those two smaller units came in and they actually repaired this thing, and then they left together.
Now, you believe that to specifically be alien tech, or could it be government tech, just that we don't know about?
I cannot imagine any government on this planet having this type of technology. I mean, it was elegant, it was silent, it was
advanced by the sounds of it. Yeah,
it was just really just mind blowing. And I mean, I instantly knew when I saw this, I instantly knew that I wasn't looking at experimental aircraft or anything like that. This was something completely a way higher level than anything like that.
Did you go back to the site and like immediately after, as close to that time afterward, to see if there was anything on the ground, any residual evidence or anything like that?
We'd had a big snowstorm right after that. In fact, it was like a freaky ice storm. And I really just never wanted to go back out there. I guess I had several reasons for thinking that. One of the reasons is that stuff was so bright. Is it radioactive? Is it, I was a little concerned about that. And being a kid, I guess you think differently,
You did the right thing. It's just that's the investigator in me thinking like, there's evidence. Did you go back? Did you get it? No, damn it. But most people, do the right thing, and that's safety first. And of course, if it imprinted that type of event on you, I don't blame you for not going back. I've never had an experience like that for sure, and I can't say as much as curious as I am with the phenomenon. I can't guarantee that if it happens to me that I won't do the same, because it's different. I imagine it's totally different than just to research about it.
It changes your entire narrative, because within an instant, it's like the question of whether or not we are alone in the universe was instantly answered for me right then and there. And I do distinctly remember thinking that as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, so the whole time, the whole UFO thing hasn't been BS at all. It's been real. And I definitely remember having that thought as I was standing there watching this thing happen.
So the date, the location. You've been researching this stuff for a long time. Have you ever gone back and found anything similar in the same area?
The interesting thing about it is, after the girlfriend and I tied into it, and I told her the story. I shared the story with her the way I shared it with you. And she's saying things like, "Oh, she doesn't believe me. What are you smoking? What are you smoking?" And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so I'm late to pick you up for the first time from work ever. And of all the excuses that I could have come up with, I landed on UFO encounter, huh? So obviously there's trouble in paradise, but we went to bed that evening, and she's still all mad and everything. We go to bed, and I'm going to watch that fight anyway. And I'm flipping through the channels, and we land on the news, local news, and they're reporting all kinds of lights in the sky all over the state of Iowa that night. I guess the guard base or something had been activated, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
The whole deal. And so I turned to her and looked at her like, I didn't see it, huh? Everybody else sure did.
I want to look that up. What's the date? What was the date? Do you remember? Exactly.
What was that? I can pull it up right now.
That's what we call corroborating evidence. That's significant. You got witness testimony. Do you think it might have been radioactive at all?
I mean, it's hard to say what year was that. Was hang on a second here. February 11th of 1990 was that night.
Okay, cool.
Do I think it's radioactive? I mean, I like to hope not, because I mean, there's food grown there in that field. I mean, like a lot of it. It's a huge cornfield.
Were there any crop circles?
Well, it was wintertime, so I mean, everything. It was just like a fine layer of frost on the ground. There were no crops up or anything like that. And again, this was happening. There's like a gate. There's like a farm. This road dead ends in this farm field. There's like one of those big farm gates, and then you'd have to drive back into this field, maybe, I mean, hundreds of yards to get back to where this thing was. It wasn't, like I say, it wasn't right on top of me. Thank goodness. Probably a good thing for me, actually.
Well, yeah, if it's dropping stuff off, I think you were in the ideal position.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that was really interesting. Now you have two experiences. Is the second one like better than that, or what?
The second one's interesting because it actually happened in front of a group of people. And this is several years later. This is the mid-90s. And as it happens, I was living between Dayton and Cincinnati, Ohio at the time. There's a bunch of little towns in there. I was living in one of them. And a friend of mine in Cincinnati, a guy I knew from high school, ended up owing me a little bit of money. And in lieu of paying me the money that he owed me, which wasn't a lot, he offered me this boat that he had. It was like a 24-foot cabin cruiser, like a 1972 boat. The cabin was ghastly. I mean, I'm sure when it was built, it was a nice boat. But I mean, now the cabin part of it's like for storage only. It's real messed up. But I took it. I said, what the heck, right? And, you know, I grew up in Cincinnati or that area, so I'm a river rat anyway. So I took the boat, and in fact, he actually has a property on the Ohio River with a dock, so I can even keep my boat there for free. So it worked out pretty well. And I'd had the boat out a couple of times just to mess around with it, and it ran fine and all that. And one evening, my girlfriend at the time looked at a weather report and saw that it was going to be a super clear night, and she wanted to go out and do some stargazing on the river. We'd done this before, and sounded like a great idea. So I called a friend of mine up and invited he and his new girlfriend with us, and they accepted. So they were going to meet us at the boat dock at a certain time. Well, that night on the way to the dock, my girlfriend and I stopped and we bought some batteries. I had one of those big Maglite flashlights on board. It was one of those like 6 D cell batteries or whatever. Had one of those. And at some point, somebody had wired up this little emergency light on the gauge panel of the boat with like a little 9-volt battery, little square battery. I guess, I don't know why they did that, but it was there. And I thought, what the hell, I'll go ahead and get a battery for that. So I did, and I hooked the battery up and I tested that light. So both of these lights are tested and they're fine. Got some wine coolers and stuff like that. You know, we were going to party a little bit. So we basically all arrived about the same time to the boat dock and got on board, got the boat out and everything, and headed downriver. This is about 9 or so o'clock at night in Ohio, and this is late August. So it's just now getting really dark. And the place that I wanted to go to on the river was about 10 miles downriver, because it's just back then there were places where there's like no light pollution, no civilization. I mean, nothing. It's like the perfect place to see the cosmos. Mm-hmm. And anyway, the guy that was with us, I'd known him since childhood, and the girl that he was with, that's like the first time I'd ever met her. So I didn't really know her. And as we're headed downriver, we get maybe 5 or 6 miles downriver, and I start seeing this weird light on the left side of my boat, and it's kind of close to the shore. And I remember thinking it looked out of place. It's something that it was just different, something different about this light. But then again, we're talking the 90s, and back in the 80s and 90s, you saw a lot of party boats back in those days with neon all over them and stuff. Pretty sure that every rock and roll station, radio station in the city had a barge, you know, for the river, that sort of thing. So, you know, you would see decked out stuff. So I just sort of wrote it off as that, and we weren't going to hit it. We weren't on course to hit it. So heck with it. As we're getting closer to this thing, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon I'm looking at this, I'm going, what in the hell is that? It doesn't look like a boat. When you see something, when your mind sees something, and I've noticed this, that you can't explain, that you don't that you don't have a clue as to what you're looking at, your mind tends to go to things that are more familiar. For whatever reason, and I know this is going to sound stupid, but I don't know if you remember the old Atari game Super Breakout, where you got that little paddle thing that goes along the bottom and that ball beep, 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 beep. Yeah. It reminded me of that paddle. Okay. I don't know why, but this thing is probably 600 or 700 yards away from us, and we're almost parallel to it at this point. And the women are starting to go, "What is that?" They're starting to ask questions and stuff. Well, all of a sudden the boat dies. Boom, completely dead. I reach over and turn the key and hit the button. Nothing happens. So I grabbed that Maglite flashlight again that I just put batteries in that day, fired it up. It's dead. Okay. Brand new batteries. So, okay, that's weird. I went ahead and flipped that little switch on that little emergency light that was wired up there. Again, brand new battery. It was also dead. So the women are starting to panic at this point. And for whatever reason, the previous owner of this boat, and this is going to sound crazy, but he had an old set of Bushnell binoculars that were wrapped up in an oil-covered paper bag. Probably the absolute stupidest thing to have on your boat, but I was a kid, and that's, it was there. So I picked these field glasses up, and I threw them up to my eyes, and as soon as I did that, I realized this thing wasn't on the water. It was hovering above the water. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't want to say anything to panic the women because they're already kind of freaking out here. So I wanted to tamp that down. And so I handed the binoculars to my buddy. Let's call him Steve. Okay. I love the guy, but he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, let's say. I hand the field glasses to Steve. He throws them up and immediately did the one thing I didn't want him to do. He said, "Oh my God, that thing's hovering above the water," which that completely sent the women into a panic. They're freaking out. "Paddle us out of here, paddle us out of here." And it's like, honey, this is a 24-foot boat. Unless you have a purse full of Hebrew slaves, we're not paddling this thing anywhere. We're at the mercy of the current here. So I'm trying to calm them down. All this is going on. Then this object, it flashed, it pulsated, and then boom, shot completely right over top of the boat. I mean, we're all looking straight up at this thing, and it is enormous. It's like, other people said they saw some tinges of red in it, but I saw a blue and white light, and it was enormous. It was the size of several train cars. It looks like it tapered like a football at the ends, as much as I could tell. And I remember it all happened so fast, and we're all looking at this, and nobody said a word. I mean, even the women, everybody got just dead quiet, because I remember hearing the waves of the water splashing up on the hull of the boat, right? And, so as we're looking at this weird light started, like what someone later described as raining down upon us. Okay. And it was a real bright light, but it didn't hurt my eyes. But what it did do was kind of wash everything out. Like, we were looking around at each other and you could see people's faces, but they were washed out. I remember looking at the gauge cluster and the steering wheel, and again, it was also washed out. And this went on for maybe a minute or so. And then all of a sudden, this weird light that had been raining down on us just disappeared. It just kind of dissipated into nothing. And pretty much as soon as that happened, this thing pulsates again and then shoots, like faster than a blink of an eye. I would say probably about 3 miles downriver. And this time it's on the right side of our boat.
Could you hear anything?
Nothing. There was no noise of any kind. And when it disappeared, it took everybody a few minutes before anybody said anything, because everybody was just so completely blown away by what just happened here. Right.
So was there any time missing on this one?
No, not that I know of. No,
not that you knew of. Eh? So again, physical effects of I guess electrical effects for both of these two events. That seems to be common for. I don't know if that's common for you or common for at least for you, because you're involved in that. The other people too. But like, were there any physical effects on you at all that you might have noticed later? Because however, if it was an EMP pulse, for lack of a better term of understanding, if that's what happened, you weren't, there was no EMF, signs of EMF. What do you mind talking about it? Jesus Christ. Burns, radioactive burns. Nothing on you at all. No residual evidence. Nothing.
No, nothing on me. Nothing on the girlfriend that we ever talked about.
It's just strange because it affects the technology, technology affecting technology, but we seem to be unaffected.
Mm-hmm. Those batteries on that boat were brand new. Even the boat batteries themselves. When I bought the boat, that's one of the things I had to do was buy new batteries, like $200 a piece. So they were brand new on this boat. So there's no reason they should have failed.
$200 a piece for a battery? Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd be finding out who that craft is, and I'd be billing them.
I know, right?
You owe me some freaking batteries.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit! That is amazing. So, I mean, it's no surprise, but I'd be silly if I didn't say it. But like, have you ever had it like reported? Have you ever made an official report and had someone do some research on it?
There's actually more to the story.
Okay, well, keep going then. Keep going.
As this thing left and it's hanging out down again, it's probably 3 or so miles away at this point. It emitted this weird beam of light that came down from underneath it, because Steve and I are trading binoculars watching this. I'm trying to get my girlfriend to come up and see this. I'm going, honey, it's gone. It didn't kill us. Come and see this. You'll never see something like this again. And she's like, oh no, I don't want to see it. I wasn't impressed, but anyway, yeah. So,
Next.
yeah, exactly. So this beam of light comes down and it starts like moving like this underneath the craft, like it's scanning the water. What it reminded me of the time was like a copy machine. You know, copy machines do that. And it's moving. It's like it's scanning the water. It's looking for something in the water. I was convinced of that. And it's moving very slowly, and it comes across our bow again, and it keeps moving. Well, all of a sudden, we start hearing the roar of military jet engines in the distance, and they're getting louder and louder and louder, and they're coming from the direction of Wright Pat. That was the only base around there that I could think of. That's probably where they came from. Anyway, so they're getting louder and louder and louder. Then all of a sudden, this object, it retracts that light back up into itself. I don't mean it turns it off. I mean, it's like, retracts the light back up. It pulsates again and shoots straight up and is absolutely out of sight instantly. Gone. Within 30 seconds, here come two, I assume they're F-16 fighters, came in really low and really fast across the river. And they banked to the left and they went down. I think they were too far down because they started circling the area. It's like they were a few miles maybe down where this thing was or whatever. In other words, they were in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. And they did this for maybe 30 minutes, and then they left the way they came. Well, we're at the mercy of the current here, okay? We're dressed for summertime. It's getting dark. It's getting cool, things of that nature. The only thing that we had to cover ourselves up with was this ratty, spider-infested tarp that was in that nasty boat. It was something. It was gross, but it was something. Well, the next morning, an empty barge ship comes by, and we got his attention, and we had a whiteboard with us, and we told him we need help, and he had a whiteboard with him. Okay, I'll send somebody. And River Patrol showed up maybe an hour later. This guy, a River Patrol officer in like a jet ski looking little boat. He wasn't going to tow us anywhere. He came up alongside, and we threw him a line. He comes over, and he asked what happened. Mm-hmm. So I just said we lost power. I didn't know what to say. Everybody had this freaked out look on their face, and he knew it too. I mean, he was picking up on that. But I said, no, we just lost power. He said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go ahead and I'll have somebody come and tow you. Now, that was a bummer for me because I always heard back in those days, if River Patrol has to touch your boat for some reason, it's an automatic $2,500. Okay.
Thanks.
And that was a lot of money for me when I was, a kid. So sure enough, half an hour or so later, this big iron boat, a ship of some kind, looked like a freaking destroyer escort, comes by. We throw them a line and they tow us to their little office on the water or whatever, their headquarters. Well, as we pull up, there's two guys standing on the dock like they're waiting on us. There's a little guy in like oily coveralls, obviously the mechanic, and then there was the officer that was in charge. But here's the thing about this guy, is God as my witness. He was hard to look at because he looked almost identical to the skipper from Gilligan's Island. Okay. I mean, I'm telling you, it was like the guy could have played Alan Hale. He really could have. But the thing about it is he's from Kentucky, so he's got a real thick, like Kentucky accent. So he asked who the captain is. And I said, oh, that's me. He goes, okay, well, come on in and we need to do some paperwork and stuff. And that's when I was thinking, oh, crap, this is going to cost me thousands of dollars. they take us into their office, and they got this awesome break room in there, just unbelievable. So all my friends go in there and get coffee or whatever, and this cop, he takes me up into his office, like a second floor thing. So we get into his office, and again, this is the mid 90s, no internet yet, things of that nature. He did have a computer on his desk. I don't know what the hell it did, but he's fumbling around for papers and stuff, and he pulls out this pack of papers, and it's one of those like long things where forms where you got like a pink copy, a yellow copy, a blue copy, and they're each for different, like that, the old style. So he takes all my information and all that, and he gets down to the bottom of this thing, and there's like this place where you can just like freehand write, in your own words what happened. So he says, okay, so what happened? And to this day, I don't know why. I don't know why I decided to do this. I could have just said we lost power and that would have been the end of it. But I'll tell you something about this guy. I told him the whole story, and he leaned back in his chair, didn't write anything down, and I laid the entire story out like I've shared it with you folks. And at the end of that, he said, well, son, I believe you. I believe you. And of all the things that I was expecting to come out of that man's mouth, that was not it. Okay. I was not thinking he was going to believe me. And he goes on to say that the reason he believes me is that he grew up in that area all his life. Mm-hmm. And those jets last night were buzzing his house, and he'd never heard that before. And being the top river cop, he was expecting that there'd be some kind of a crash or accident. He was expecting the phone to ring, which never did. Mm-hmm. So he decided not to write it up.
Yeah, he already knew before talking to you that something went down, so he was prepared to write it. Right. But so did he write anything down?
Nope. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He's like, look, I don't even know how to report this. It's probably not good for you, probably not good for me. So, I'm not even going to write this up. But the interesting thing about it was that, in fact, he took us to breakfast. There was a Denny's nearby, and he offered to take us to breakfast. And the reason he did this, being a cop, was so he could talk to my buddy Steve and get the story out of him too, see if our stories, mesh, corroborated or whatever, which of course they did.
Yep.
We come back from breakfast, and the mechanic guy's standing there waiting on us. And he walks up and talks to the top cop guy. And then they walk over to me and they're like, listen, these look like brand new batteries, but they won't take a charge. I cannot get these batteries to charge, because he was going to hook us up while we were at breakfast.
Right.
And I ended up having to buy new batteries right then, have them sent from their supplier before we could leave. And these batteries were absolutely dead. And again, brand spanking new, probably weren't a month old, So that cop, it was very interesting. He was absolutely believed what I said, what I was telling him. And again, because of the jet thing and all the pieces, I guess, fit. I often wondered what happened to that guy, if he's still alive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's pause. Okay, I'm going to read my little thing here. Let's pause right here, but we will continue after a message from our professional partners. Also, if you're listening to this live on KPNL Radio or on a future podcast, head over to youtube.com/The Experiencer Support Association to see the video that goes with the audio. Don't forget to comment hashtag Tessa merch on the YouTube chat to win a prize at the end of the month, which is this hat here, the Tessa hat, and this bumper sticker that says, I am an experiencer. So also, I noticed in the comments, you guys are having a great conversation in YouTube. I'm going to shout out to Jill Hibbern and Jenny Goodman Pearson. You guys are on Facebook and you guys are commenting, but we don't answer questions unless you're on YouTube. So head over to youtube.com/The Experiencer Support Association, and we'll be happy to answer your questions after that. So remember that you are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencer Support Association, and we will be right back.
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis and was really taken by his research. He's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada. And just as interesting, he really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. Note for starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them. If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolanmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, Let's be good to each other.
The same thing that draws aliens to our planet is the same thing that draws us to others. Exploration, curiosity, sustainability of life. That's why we go. It would make sense as to why they're visiting here.
Travis! Quit playing around, man. Get back here. Travis!
The last thing I remember was this numbing shock. Stunning sort of a feeling. Very powerful.
Get away from me!
I was just out of my mind with fear, just screaming the whole time.
It's been theorized that aliens prefer remote areas because they don't want to attract attention. Whatever it is that they're doing, they would want to do that in a less populated area. There are multiple accounts of the same thing from people from all over the world. People that do not know each other, do not live in the same cultures, and they're all looking up, they're all seeing things in the sky. So it would be naive of us to think that we're alone in the universe.
My mission is to assist and help those experiencing this phenomenon in such a way that they're able to continue and live with it, and also in a way that it can be measured, quantified, and reinforced within today's society, so that way it can be accepted and no longer viewed in a negative way. One thing that I do value in people is the ability to sense and feel when something is right and when something is wrong. That is a natural ability that we all share. Now, when we combine that with the paranormal and ufological abductions or visits, I have this sensation that these abilities are connected. Not everyone can sense, not everyone can feel. However, those who can are typically connected with something that we cannot explain. And part of my research is not just to investigate the experience, but it's also to understand and study the experiencer to find out what they have in common with other experiencers, to try to figure out what the actual makeup is in order to be on that spectrum. There's a lot of it happening all over the world, and I do not know of any other study that is focusing on the individuals as people, only the phenomenon. Welcome back. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. If you're enjoying this episode so far, remember, head over to patreon.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Join the unclassified tier for only a few bucks a month. Your membership will get you at least an extra half hour of this conversation, as well as a bunch of other perks for being a Tesla Insider. Also, if you have ever experienced an unexplained event, this including you, Tommy, and the other Thomas, and Tim, the UFO man, who is all here, all you guys. If you're I lost my track here. Involving the paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrials, dogman, or any other extra paracryptid, head over to tessacan.org/reporting system. So I want to basically shout out to everybody on YouTube. So I wrote them down on the break. Tommy Highway, KPNL Radio, Chantal Chauvet, UFO Man, HHG Reviews, Greg Brewer, Thomas Fessler, LM, and Dan Jones. Thank you so much for commenting tonight, and it's glad to have you guys here. Great conversation. Everyone is really enjoying your experience. Something tells me by the comments from Tim and Thomas that they may not have heard this before. Is this true? Have they heard your experiences before?
Yeah, actually, both stories are in my book, Strange Tales from the Highway. You can actually, if you want to help me out, folks, you can pick that up at TommyHighway.com. I'd really appreciate that. I did just want to add something real quick, though. Something to add on to the tail end of the last story there. Many years later, This is like 2003. Okay, so we're talking almost 10 years later. I was up in the Dayton Mall area. It's like Christmas time, and I'm walking through the mall, and this woman, I'm walking through the food court, and I see this woman with a young guy, and they got like a baby stroller, and she's staring a hole through me. And it's one of the things where you're like looking at a person, and you look away and look back and see if they're still looking at you, right?
Right.
Well, about the third time I did this or so, she pops up and comes like power walking over to me, and as she got closer to me, I recognized her. She was the girl that was there that night that was dating my friend. And again, I'd only met her one time, and they weren't together long. And I'm telling you, she walked up to me, she recognized me after all those years, and so didn't so much as even say hello before she started talking about that night. Blew her husband away. I found out it was her husband later. Blew her husband away about this, and he kept saying things like to her, like, "Why haven't you ever told me this before?" Well, this isn't an easy conversation to have with somebody. Oh, by the way, aliens are real. I mean, that doesn't really come up around the dinner table very often, I guess.
Well, it depends on where you're eating, I guess.
That's true.
We could talk about that for days.
I do now. I mean, now that I'm, involved in ufology, a co-host of a show and all that, of course, I let them know right away what I'm all about. But back in those days, it was a little bit more difficult.
But you are an experiencer, and that's important too. So your courage to talk about it is the entire point of our channel as well. And I do want to thank you for sharing that, because again, our audience is hearing this for their first time, but it's relatable to them, and that's the whole point. The more we talk about it, the more others can feel like, hey, that happened to me, kind of scenario. I just want everybody to take that one extra step and make a report to Tessa, so that way we can document it, get more evidence out of it, and try to make sense and connect the dots from all over the place, because this phenomenon is happening everywhere. I'm in Canada, you're in US. I mean, we're not that far apart when we're dealing with the same phenomenon. There is no borders in ufology or paranormal or anything like that too. So questions. Yes, Tommy asks a good question as well. Let me see here, though. I think some other people asked questions before him. Let me just double check. But while I'm looking, let's just get that in here. So Thomas says, does Tommy see ghosts, spirits, etc.?
Not as a rule. I do have an experience, and again, it's another story that's in my book, but something happened many years ago, and it was actually, I had a group of friends with me when this happened, and we did witness something that led me to believe that there's something else. There's some other kind of residual energy or something left behind after a person dies. I'll put it that way. And was it a spirit, a soul, a ghost? I don't know, but it was something.
Interesting parallel too that I was thinking as well when you were explaining the technology with this UFO or UAP, or however we want to identify it, this unidentified flying machine of some sort. The battery effect, that is a common phenomenon in the paranormal community as well, where spirit attachment or anything like that presents the draining of electronics and batteries and things like that. So that same type of phenomenon or energy, or however that is manipulated, those are kind of key elements where I'm starting to see that maybe it is a technology, and perhaps that technology is being controlled or manipulated by people in that sense, not necessarily ghosts. But that's just one of those key elements that I try to mention whenever I can to bridge that gap, because we do believe that it's all connected, and we call that the ultra spectrum. HHG Reviews had a comment about or slight towards MUFON. I kind of wanted to touch on that. He said MUFON won't check for radioactive signs after sightings. They say there's not enough proof. I can comment on that because I was the National Chief Investigator for MUFON Canada. And I also was the Director of Field Investigating Training for MUFON National for many years. And no, there is no follow through. They tell you to read the book, and then they leave you on your own. So I wouldn't say MUFON on a whole doesn't do it. The training element doesn't do it. There are some individuals that will follow through, and those are the independent investigators that need to be recognized for the work that they do. Dan Jones is an example of that. He's in the chat tonight. He's a field investigator for MUFON Canada. He was one of the field investigators that I had worked with in the past, and he's an example of how he's doing something different and following through. He's following to the code of the book and all that other stuff, and he's having frustrations too, which is why he is going to be a member of TESSA as soon as I get through all other stuff there. It's coming, man. So, all right, Tommy, for the last little bit before we head over to Patreon, how about you tell everybody where they can find you, talk about UFO Man. I know you wanted to mention your new website coming out. Everybody's mentioned that too. So use this last little bit to just tell everybody what you got going on, where they can find you. And then we'll talk paranormal experiences in Patreon. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Well, folks, again, been great being here. Really appreciate it. UFO Man, I'll tell you, what we do over there is we're out for disclosure. And we've almost kind of gotten to the point where we've given up on government disclosure. What we're actually focusing on is the little pieces of the puzzle that all the other experiences out there they're holding. Everybody has a little piece of this puzzle. And we're trying to get together and put all those pieces together. And when we do that, we get a better understanding of the bigger picture of what we're talking about here. It truly is a grassroots effort. You can find our website at www.ufomannetwork.com. And if you go over there, we'd really appreciate it. You can also find my books and the other things that I'm into over at tommyhighway.com. I'd really appreciate that. I've got some very interesting books over there, some political stuff, the whole nine. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, Cool. Yeah, no, I like that concept. I like that you are on the right ball. That's what we're doing as well too. One step further, at the end of the year, we put a report together. As you guys will see, I know you guys, some of you guys have been following that for two. And when I release that, I want you guys to take a good look at that, because this time next year, perhaps you could submit some of your best findings from your collection, and then we can have a collaborative report from all these organizations that are doing that and put something out. It would be very good to have some American content attached to our Canadian content to actually show that we are working together, and there are no borders. And and I want to thank all three of you, since you are here tonight. You've given me the opportunity to be on your podcast. This is the last episode as far as the Karma contract goes, but I really hope that this is not the last time that we work together. I really hope that we do work on some projects together, and that you guys report, because I really want to get into that, because I know that some of your experiences are some of the stuff that's already been reported, and I could introduce you to some people that may have seen the same thing, and then you guys can have conversations and learn from each other too, not just as the ufology part, but you need to learn from each other as experiencers, because maybe everybody on that boat has missing time, and maybe something else happened, and the reason why no one's talking to each other anymore is because they remember and you don't. Have you ever considered regression hypnotherapy?
I really haven't, mainly because I guess there are just certain things that I don't want to know. I guess if that is happening to me, and if I have been abducted, which I'm not saying I have, I don't believe that I have, no strange marks, anything like that, but I'm not sure I'd want to know, I guess, at this point, because it seems to have a pretty detrimental effect on the lives of a lot of folks that have dealt with it.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's to your own comfortability as well. But if by making a report, if that's something we can refer to you as well if you need it. Sure. LM, sorry, I just saw a question here. She has said, does Tommy experience strong synchronicities in his daily life?
Depending, I guess that it sort of depends on the context. I would have to say probably no. I mean, everything's pretty normal. I haven't had another experience with a UFO or exotic technology or anything like that since those two experiences. But I'll tell you one thing I do is I look up in the sky now. I mean, that's absolutely look up into the sky. And one of the things that we like to tell folks, our viewers over at UFO Man, is no matter what phone, whatever telephone that you're rocking in your pocket, I promise you there's probably 500 videos out there on YouTube that tell you exactly how to use it. And it's helpful because if you're ready to go with your phone and you know how to use it, you're not going to miss those moments if you do have that experience. You know, it's very important.
Yeah, that's the trick part too, right? Is remembering that you have that in the moment. Mm-hmm. But in cases like you, if you fast forwarding to this time, if you were affected by an EMF or EMP, would your phone be available to be used?
Nope, no way.
Right. So the other thing that you can do that will never fail is journaling. Mm-hmm. And drawing. So if you remember it afterwards, draw it out too, because that's important as well. Because that can be, it's called analogical evidence. So that can also be used if we get enough people drawing the same thing from all over the place. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave it at that, and let me see if we have any questions. No, we're just going to head over to Patreon. So I guess that's great. So do you have anything else you want to add, man?
I think we're good. I'll see you at Patreon.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. Remember, patreon.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes in the sky and heed the world.
Tonight's episode was brought to you by the Paranormal Hangar, the official merchandising store of the Experiencer Support Association. Head over to theparanormalhangar.com and browse our inventory. We have branded mugs, mouse pads, tote bags, and so much more. All proceeds go back into the organization, and if you are a Patreon member, you will get a discount code for all of your purchases. Remember, this conversation isn't over, just the free version. We will dive even deeper on patreon.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes in the sky. And say it with me. Heed the world. Good night, everybody.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, where together, my friends, we own the night. On our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a place called the SOR Sightlines Report. All of our investigations and people who inquire are turned over to TESSA, the Experiencer Support Association. Ryan Stacy and his crew, what I like about them, they're independent. They're not working for anybody, and they want answers. We want answers for our listeners and people who inquire as well about their experiences. It's a great tandem, and we love being teamed up with TESSA. If you haven't heard of us before, that's okay. We'd love to earn your listening ears. Join us 9:06 Pacific Time, 12:06 a.m. Eastern for 3 hours of live entertainment 7 days a week.
We are the ones in the dark. We are the first on the scene. We are the last to leave. We will counsel you. We will comfort you. We will save your life. We are the unsung. We are the underdogs.